So I'm gonna talk about a couple things. First is like how we can make Ethereum transactions readable. And second, a few thoughts on like just thinking about wallets versus dApps versus signing providers versus all of these things in the stack. So well, why making things readable? This is the everyday of like our users, and not only our users but ourselves. Like I feel it's kind of, you're with a multi-sig, you're moving $5 million around, and you don't really know what you're doing at all. So it's tricky. Obviously, there is like a MetaMask screenshot because people use MetaMask, and that's the main thing people use today, and that's amazing. But it is common to every single provider out there. So what we have came up with, I don't know if are you guys familiar with Ethereum Natspec? Is anyone familiar? Cool, all right. So basically the idea behind Natspec is that you may be able to describe what your code does in your Solidity contracts, and then you can use that to show the user what the user is going to perform. Natspec is not very safe, mainly because it executes any given JavaScript, so you could have like some code that basically like gets keys from the browser or whatever. So we built a safe alternative called Radspec. And Radspec, it's basically Natspec, but in the sense that it's totally safe, and you can describe what your code does. Like for example, here, this is the burn function of our finance app in Aragon, and it doesn't really matter what it does; it just matters the notice there. So as you can see, there are two parameters like holder and amount. And what you can do with Radspec is you can multiply it, or you can like display. You can do like a string interpolation. From your parameters to then like some human-readable version of that. So I'm gonna show Radspec live today. So this is, oops, too much zoom. This is Aragon, and basically how it works here, I'm gonna try to sign a transaction. So we can just go to like the token manager app or whatever. This is the DAO I did yesterday at EdCon. And you can like assign tokens or do whatever action. And I hope it works. And then you click assign tokens. It will think for a little bit because it just takes time for some reason. And then it will come out with this beautiful like signer view. And right now what we have done here is like if you see there down there, like it says action to be triggered, mint 1 tokens for X. That's taken out of our Radspec comment in our in the same thing that I showed you in the previous slide. And right now we're implementing that in this view here that we have inside our app. And the thing, I don't want to get into this too much, but basically this is sandboxed. Like all the apps in here are sandboxed, and the signer view is on top of any given app that because Aragon can have multiple apps inside it and all of that. So the idea is that this is sandbox, and no one is able to alter that message whatsoever. So you can send a transaction, and then you would just like go and send a transaction. The issue with this, and I wanna talk about this later, is that probably shouldn't be at the Aragon level. It should be at like the MetaMask level or the party level or stuff like that, because otherwise each one dApp could implement like their human-readable descriptions and their own signer view, and that's a bit of a headache. So what Radspec does is it can perform calls to external contracts. It is safe. It has no access to the DOM at all. It can just do like a few very like limited subset of things, like a multiply, divide, change and modify strings around. It's very simple. Like the syntax, as you guys saw, is like really simple for developers to use. And for the 0.001% of contracts out there that use Natspec, they can migrate to Radspec pretty easily. So next steps, in the case of Frame, we want to bring the Radspec support to Frame, because right now in Aragon, you will have to sign in Aragon, and you will see what you are doing in Aragon, and then Frame will pop up and probably just show the same thing. So as I said before, this stuff should be moved to probably wallets or signing providers, and not be at the dApp level. So we actually want to remove this from Aragon down the stack. And by having that at the Frame level also, this will support like any Electron browser or whatever way you're accessing the Web3 universe, and also any signing methods, just software wallets, Ledger, Trezor. Would be good to have this in MetaMask too. And also some mobile client, I guess, because my idea is that, like, I don't know, 3 months from now or something, when I'm interacting with Web3, I know what I'm doing, both in the desktop and in mobile. So, and then we have to sort of determine a threat model. So right now it's up for the developers to implement this. What if they, say, hey, this function is gonna give you 1 Ether, and it does the opposite, for example, right? There is no way to try that out. So I have a couple things that we could do to actually make it secure. There are basically 2 paths to make this very secure. One of them is having a curated list of the function descriptions of, like, okay, this function does that. And then if it's in a TCR of, like, for example, a smart contract auditor, then you can sort of verify that that guy is doing his job and verifying that the description is legit and is actually doing what the code is supposed to do. Another way we're interested in, and I won't get into the details, but it's like a smart contract interface claims. So basically having the contract say, hey, this is my interface, these are my descriptions, and claiming ownership over them. So yeah, you can have like a curated list of action descriptions, very like super, like a TCR with just like 2 functions, register interface and get interface, which would just register different like descriptions for a smart contract and fetch them using IPFS or something like that. Well, you gotta have some governance because it's a TCR. You gotta have governance on how proposals and stuff gets merged, so to say, and that will be a way. And another way is actually having like smart contracts claim their interfaces, their like descriptions. And so that would be cool because basically what you can do is you can do this, and I think there's an ERC on that. You can have a contract forward its intent to say, okay, this is why where my like interfaces and my descriptions live, and I claim ownership over this set of descriptions. And I think that's pretty cool, actually. This could look like this, probably. Like this is the format it could take. You could have like a function signature, and then the Radspec description for it, and then this could be on IPFS, and the contract should claim ownership over this file and say this is where my descriptions are. I think both are very interesting, and like we just have to think about the threat model a little bit and actually make it secure so developers cannot trick users even if they want. I mean, it's cool because everything is open source in the first place, so that's a better start. But still, we have to like make sure we nail down the small details, and it's impossible for developers to scam users. Then getting past Radspec, I want to talk about the separation of concerns, and I didn't have these slides until like half of the day because I was just saying, oh my god, we don't even, like we're here like as a community and we don't really know where we stand. Like, I feel that we should sort of have very clear separation of concerns. Like in the beginning, it was like Get, for example, it was everything. It did like everything. But now we are getting down the like expanding the stack, and we have different like protocols and different products that do different things. So I think we should have dApps, and dApps can be wallets. I don't really like to treat wallets as a first-class citizen because I think they are just a dApp that moves funds around. Then you have signing providers, which basically is like interacting with hardware wallets, software wallets, whatever method you have to sign stuff. Actually, it can be either like a signing method for like signing with multiple keys or stuff like that. And finally, Web3 providers, which are what connects you to the Web3 world, to the blockchain, and provides you information about the state and lets you broadcast transactions to eventually change that state. And I think it's important to know that the wallets are just a kind of dApp, really. I think it's important because like it's dangerous that we build like ad hoc and super hard-coded systems for our needs, and that's something that I've been seeing. Like we're all doing a terrible job at communicating what we are doing. I think in our case it's terrible too. Like we are, I know that we are not even communicating half of the stuff that we are building. So I think this is very, very important that we acknowledge that we should build the systems to be very abstracted and be like very reusable. Like for example, multi-sig to factor auth. We've been seeing a lot of this stuff popping up these days, and I think we should build them in a way that is just usable for security in general, and not just for moving funds, for example. So I think it's important to treat wallets as like a kind of dApp, really. And that's why I dislike like the wallet conf like hashtag or stuff like that. I think you have to abstract over moving funds. Moving funds is just like the first use case that is ever existed for crypto. I want to talk a little bit about like, do we have time? Yeah. About the concept of like personal DAO, because I think it comes back to something that Alex presented before. So basically we are saying, okay, Ethereum accounts are not very usable because you have to tell people to like back up their key and all of that. I think Alex made a very good job at explaining that. And we've been thinking about these too, and we have been naming it like a personal DAO. And basically the idea is that you don't have your account that represents you. You have a DAO, a blockchain entity which represents you. This has very good side effects. Like one of them is if you go to like an Aragon like organization, it has like an ENS name by default. It has an identity by default. So you get that for free basically, and then you get also like different apps for free. You can install a vault. You can have like fund recovery an app, and you can have rich permissions between apps and what apps do to each other, and I think one of the cool side effects, and I will like put examples here, is that you can have systems such as this one, like a key split system. Like I'm seeing like 5 or 6 like key split systems popping up, and it would be cool if this is like reusable and easy to use, not for just like an ad hoc use case, but for everything in general. So you can have like a key split app that gives permission to a set of people to access your funds if like you haven't transacted, or like a Deathman switch basically, that you can build by having a finance app which holds the funds, and then this key split app, which basically, if there are two things that two things that that comply, such as for example that you haven't transacted and that your friends send like 5 valid signatures or whatever, then your friends can start having access to an Ether per month, and the next month 10 Ether, and then everything out of it, for example. So that's how you build like a super easy, and this could be built in like literally 25 lines of code, something like that. Then example 2 is you can have a finance app that gives permission to a set of keys to access funds in a progressive manner. And this is what like everyone has been talking about today, and I think it's an amazing idea. Like we should stop using Ethereum accounts and we should switch to like using entities or proxy contracts or something in general that is not like a vanilla Ethereum account. How we've been thinking about this is like basically like this, with the permission system in Aragon OS, which is the smart contract framework we use. You can have like super rich permissions. So you can say, hey, I'm giving permission to this key to access 1 ETH per month in this finance app. Or hey, if you get together these 2 keys, then you can have access to 10 Ether. And you can get very rich using this system. Like not very rich in terms of like funds. I mean like you can get like things that are very complex. What I like too is like, wallets are just one thing, funds are just one thing. It was hard for me to find an example that doesn't have to do with funds, because everything like in this space deals with funds today, because like there are very few apps working. But I was thinking about like, for example, Leroy or Pipeth or like Akasha. You can have this super cool, like how do you do, for example, like organization control social accounts, which I think is pretty cool. You can have an identity app, which is just like a forwarder, and this forwarder will do whatever the voting app tells this identity app. And basically, if you want to post to Leroy or Pipeth may have this address from your personal DAO, and then you do a voting, and if people want to post something and the voting passes, it gets posted to Akasha or Leroy or Pipeth, which I think is pretty cool. There is something similar to this, not exactly this, but with Git repos that we have now. There's a team that we gave a grant to them for implementing decentralized Git repos using like that can be controlled by a DAO, and I think it's kind of the same thing. You could even have like Git repos controlled by you, but you can only have like a read key, and then like if you have like 2 keys, you can actually write. Like you can really get very complex stuff out of here. That's it. We have Radspec live today at .aragon.1. And I think I have a bunch of time, so I would love to talk about either like Radspec or either what do you guys think about these, which I think it's important to figure out here.
Who was the first person? Yeah, sure. Well, it's
Okay, so many comments there, right? First of all, you mentioned that Radspec was able to access contracts, right? You could you could like ping a contract to know something. I would love to understand how and see an example, because when you start doing that, then you start. It's not like a single line of code that you can just create. It becomes a tiny async app, right? And I think it gets complicated, and I would love to see how you solve it. But in my opinion, the biggest problem with Natspec was of course safety, and I'm happy that you have something that works, but mostly because like where's the data, right? I mean, there are very few contracts out there that publish an Natspec, and when they publish it Swarm, which you cannot access. So, and we can talk about like token curated registries, but ideally, I would love if you could just simply start with like a big GitHub that we can all share that has like the most popular contracts under Natspec, and can describe, because in my opinion, probably because of Pareto, there's probably like a number of 100 contracts that if you add like Radspec to them, you take care of 80% of all the Ethereum transactions. And we can do it retroactively because most of those contracts are already there and don't have Radspec. So I'd love to hear like your opinions on like a lot of things.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Actually, this comes back to Dan's suggestion of like curating some sort of like list or like something between like people in the wallet community or like the dApp community to that maybe do something similar to this thing. So I think that would make sense. And then for the first question, like how do you call other contracts? Like we have this thing in Aragon called transaction forwarding, which basically is the thing that lets you like from a voting app, for example, or from a user to tell a voting app, hey, I want to do this. And then for the voting app to say, hey, if the voting passes, I'm going to do this. So that's the way you forward transactions to like from one app to another. And what Radspec does is that it can check that, you know, first of all, what you're going to do is you are going to vote. And then after voting, if voting passes, the next action is going to be to withdraw funds from the finance app, something like that. So that is how it works. Yeah.
So more of a suggestion than a question, but one thing I was thinking for the party signer, and I guess actually MetaMask will probably could do the same thing, is if you do a transaction that calls like a method on a contract to provide just the signature of the function that is used for the hash, because then you can actually verify that the hash in the 6 bytes or whatever there is on the data field actually matches the function that you get, and then you can actually visually present, you know, show the function name and then some arguments as numbers or whatever byte string. So it's not just like a blob of bytes, but it's at least like readable for not humans but programmers. And maybe on top of that you can like for the request. So for the request to sign the transaction, send the transaction, you send like the ABI string and maybe the Radspec as well. And I think if you show the Radspec and the actual like function call, you will get at least, you know, not ideal, maybe not super human readable, but like at least like improvement in the stuff, right?
Yeah, I agree. We're trying to make it accessible for like, I don't know, my mom to use it. So that's why we're not displaying that data, but we could like have an advanced stuff or something which displays you that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to Victor's great work at Trust Wallet. He's been putting together a huge list of tokens with their relevant images. So you kind of have the contract address and the kind of tokens brand there. And we're using that, and it's extremely helpful. So it could be worth us kind of adding to the spec there and kind of building out that as a kind of prototype TCR on GitHub. And you know, eventually when we're more comfortable with actually building and shipping TCRs, we can kind of get to that. So yeah, just could be a good hack to get us going quickly, and we can improve it from there.